Imagine it is 1st November 1923. You're a 36-year-old school clerk living in Berlin, Germany. You live with your wife and two children in a narrow apartment. Above a butcher's shop, every payday you place a little money into a savings account because that is what respectable people do in your society. In the kitchen drawer sits your bank book, its stamped entries adding up to years of caution, missed holidays, repaired shoes, and cold walks instead of tram fares. Each morning you button the same dark coat, stop for bread, then take the train to your office believing that patience and steady work still mean something. You're not rich, but you are careful, and careful men are supposed to survive hard times. Last month, your savings could still buy furniture and coal for winter. Maybe they could even buy lessons for your eldest son. If you have ever wondered why a savings account can turn from safety into a trap, stay with me. What you're about to hear is not a theory. It is a pattern. It has happened before many times throughout history across the entire world. And if you find value in this kind of historical clarity, subscribing takes 2 seconds and keeps you ahead of what most people never see coming. Today, before you reach the bank, the price of bread changes again. By noon, it changes again. By evening, the number in your passbook still looks large, but it buys less than it did at breakfast. The account is not growing, it is rotting. It is like storing winter apples in a cupboard while the house is on fire. The apples are still there, but their future is gone. And that is what this story is really about, not just Germany's famous hyperinflation of 1923. Back then, $1 eventually cost trillions of marks, but we are looking at what happened to ordinary savings when money itself stopped being a store of value. This simply means it could no longer hold purchasing power from one day to the next. This matters because many people think a savings account is safe. History shows it is only as safe as the money inside it, the banking system around it, and the state standing behind both at that time. Before we go further, there is something important to understand. A savings account feels solid because the number does not move backward on the page. It sits there like a brick wall. But in a currency crisis, that wall is painted on canvas. The trick is that most people do not save goods. They save claims on goods. A bank balance is a promise. It is a ticket. And that ticket only works if the currency stays trusted. When governments spend far more than they can honestly tax, and when central banks create new money to fill that hole, more and more claims start chasing goods. Then more claims chase the same amount of bread, coal, shoes, meat, rent, and fuel. Then comes the second stage where people finally notice the shift. They rush to spend money faster because holding it feels dangerous. Economists call this velocity, which means the speed at which money moves from hand to hand. In normal times, money is a bucket. You can leave water in it for later. In hyperinflation, the bucket turns to wire mesh. The faster you pour, the less you keep. Another way to see it is this. A savings account is cash wearing slower shoes. It looks calmer than the notes in your pocket because it stays in the bank. But if the unit itself is collapsing, the account is still running the same race. It is just falling behind in silence. That is why savings accounts became such a cruel illusion in Germany. The number remained, but meaning vanished. The passbook looked alive, even as its buying power bled out on the floor. Once you see that, the whole period becomes clearer and more terrifying. Hyperinflation was not simply prices going up. It was time breaking between earning and spending. It was the death of the gap between payday and tomorrow. This brings us directly to Germany. The roots of the disaster were planted long before the famous photographs of children building towers from banknotes. In 1914, Germany left the gold standard, which means banknotes were no longer anchored to a fixed amount of gold. The war was financed by borrowing. That choice mattered. It pushed the cost into the future. After the war, the future arrived all at once. Germany carried huge debts and reparations. Its politics were weak. Its society was bitter. And in 1923, after French and Belgian troops occupied the Ruhr, the government paid striking workers to resist. That passive resistance was financed with printed money. At first, many ordinary Germans still behaved as if the world was normal and disciplined. That may be the most chilling part. Children still went to school, clerks still filed papers, parents still planned weddings believing discipline would be rewarded. But the floorboards were already soft. According to a table reproduced by Facing History, $1 US was worth 4.2 marks in 1918. It rose to 75 marks in 1921, 400 marks in 1922, 7,000 marks in January 1923, 160,000 in July 1923, and 1 million in August. Then 1.3 billion on November 1923, 1.3 trillion on 15th November, and 4.2 trillion on 16th November 1923. Think about that measuring stick shrinking. The stick itself was shrinking in your hand while you were trying to measure a room. This was not abstract. It invaded kitchens and cafe tables. The Bundesbank notes that wages in many places were paid daily because waiting even a week was too long. Workers were paid at 11 a.m. by lorries. Cashiers literally threw bundles of notes to workers standing below. Teachers were paid at school, and relatives rushed the money away to buy anything. Banks closed early, clerks went on strike. Shopkeepers raised prices constantly or demanded payment in food and coal instead of paper marks. In a Freiburg cafe, a student ordered 2 cups of coffee. The menu price was 5,000 marks each. By the time the bill came, it was 14,000 marks. On a medal commemorating the chaos, the prices for November 1923 were engraved. A pound of bread cost 3 billion marks, and meat cost 36 billion. A glass of beer was 4 billion. Even language broke. Once money reaches the billions, ordinary speech begins to sound like nonsense to everyone. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The same disaster hit different classes in different ways. If you owed money, inflation could behave like acid on debt. If you had savings, it was acid poured on your life. The Bundesbank noted that hyperinflation almost completely devalued all financial assets and liabilities. The state benefited most. German war debt, once valued at 154 billion marks, was effectively crushed to 15.4 Pfennig when the Rentenmark arrived. That single fact tells you almost everything. The saver lost, the debtor won. The government, the biggest debtor of all, escaped through the fire door. For ordinary savers, the damage was intimate. Walter Levy recalled that his father, a lawyer, had paid faithfully into an insurance policy for 20 years. When it matured in 1923, the payout bought a single loaf of bread. Widows dependent on insurance were ruined, and pensioners could not buy coffee. Sebastian Hafner wrote that anyone with savings in a bank or bonds saw their value disappear overnight, whether it was a tiny fund or a fortune. George Gross remembered that shopping became a race against the clock. Even pausing at a shop window was a luxury because an extra minute meant higher prices. People carried money in knapsacks and wagons because it no longer fit in pockets. Weddings were called off because dowries evaporated in days. Families sold heirlooms. Others bought things they did not need simply because useless goods were better than useful money that was losing value. Soap became a better savings plan than a passbook. Shoes became a better bond than an insurance policy. That is the point many people miss today. Savings accounts during Germany's hyperinflation did not literally vanish in the bank's ledger. They became something worse, visible but unusable numbers. They became numbers that still existed while the life they represented had already been taken away by the devaluation of the currency itself. When stabilization finally came with the Rentenmark in November 1923, 1 trillion old paper marks were exchanged for 1 new unit for the public. Belief returned quickly enough for trade to resume. But belief did not refill the emptied lives behind those accounts or return the lost decades of work. A new clock had been hung on the wall. It did not give people back the years the old one had stolen through the destruction of their savings. If your bank statement showed a large balance, but that balance could no longer buy rent, meat, or train fare, would you still call yourself a saver? Drop your answer in the comments. Seriously. Because what I am about to show you next is the part of this story most people never hear about. Germany was not alone. The same machine has appeared in other countries, wearing different uniforms and speaking different languages across the last century. After the Second World War, Hungary suffered the most intense hyperinflation ever recorded. The names were different, but the rhythm was the same. War had shattered production. Public finances were broken. The government leaned on money creation, and money, once stretched beyond trust, finally snapped. In mid-1945, the Hungarian pengo began to slide into chaos. By 1946, it was in free fall. The government introduced something called the tax pengo. It was an attempt to keep up with a system already running away. By 31st July 1946, 1 tax pengo equaled 2 sextillion pengo in the banks. That is 2 followed by 21 zeros. By the end of that month, the paper said the pengo had lost its value totally and the population lost everything. Read that sentence again. Not most, not a painful share, practically all. Imagine what that means in ordinary life for a worker or a parent. It means wages stop functioning because by the time they are paid, they are old news and cannot buy a single meal for a family. It means there are no real prices, because no seller wants to promise a price that will be laughable an hour later in the street markets. The Hungarian Review says that by July 1946, there were neither real prices nor real wages. A salary became like a snowflake landing on a stove. It had form for a moment. Then not even memory could hold it. Housewives raced to markets and shopkeepers repriced goods every few minutes. Families bartered and improvised. Accounts, ledgers, pay packets, and budgets all became theater props from a play that no longer matched real life. The tax pengo was meant to create order, but it became a second hand on a broken clock, still moving while the mechanism underneath had failed. If Germany showed how savings could be burned in a furnace, Hungary showed they could be blown away like ash after the fire consumed the room. What becomes of a savings account when the unit inside it is disintegrating faster than you can walk from the bank to the local grocer? It becomes a museum label attached to an empty display case. The date remains, the object is gone. Hyperinflation does not need banks to fail. People often picture bank failure as locked doors and angry crowds. But there's another kind where the bank returns you the equivalent of dust. Hungary eventually stabilized with the introduction of the forint on 1st August 1946. Order returned and numbers made sense again for the people. But stabilization did not resurrect the vanished savings. Once a bridge collapses, reopening the road does not rebuild the carts that fell into the river. That is a hard truth in every inflationary history. Recovery can stop further damage, but it does not restore what cautious people already lost forever. Zimbabwe, in the late 2000s, showed the same pattern. The country had deep political and economic wounds, falling output and collapsing production. The central bank was effectively printing money to carry out government spending. Once again, too much money chased too few goods in the marketplace. Confidence shattered. Savings were fed into a furnace with no off switch. By late 2008, the collapse had become almost surreal for everyone involved. One widely cited estimate put Zimbabwe's monthly inflation in mid-November 2008 at 79.6 billion%. The Reserve Bank issued notes in the trillions. This included the famous 100 trillion Zimbabwe dollar note. One report noted that an ATM gave a data overflow error because numbers no longer fit. When inflation reaches the point that a machine built to count money can no longer count money, the breakdown is no longer theoretical but physical. For ordinary people, bank savings became an exercise in humiliation. A balance could sit there while transport fares and bread sprinted away in price. A worker paid on Friday could be poor by Saturday morning. Shops emptied. Prices had to be rewritten again and again by the merchant class. People wanted groceries, fuel, and medicine, not electronic promises and a currency that might lose half its worth before the sun sets each day. Many turned to barter. Many sought US dollars or South African rand. Many simply endured. The savings account became a glass jar holding smoke. Hyperinflation turns even memory against you. The longer you had saved, the more absurd the final outcome felt compared to your years of effort. A note that once bought a month of food could not buy a bus ride. A bank balance built over years could shrink faster than children walk. The mathematics became monstrous, but the pain stayed ordinary. Skipped meals, postponed medicine, dark houses, and canceled family plans that mattered. In early 2009, Zimbabwe officially recognized what people had already done. Hard currencies were adopted for all transactions to fix the broken system. Dollarization gave trade a ruler that did not melt. Stores could stock goods again, prices could be posted, wages could finally mean something again. But the people whose savings had been held in Zimbabwe dollars did not wake up made whole. The harvest that died did not stand up. Most people will never know what you now know. Most people will keep trusting systems they do not understand. If you are here, subscribe. Now observe what all of these cases have in common. Germany 1923, Hungary 1946, Zimbabwe 2008. Different continents, but the same mechanism. First, the state spends beyond what the economy can support. Second, money creation fills the gap. Third, goods or confidence become scarce for people. Fourth, people stop treating money as a storehouse and start treating it like a hot coal. They spend faster. Sellers raise prices faster than before. The saver discovers the ugliest truth of all. A savings account is not a vault of value. It is a delayed claim on a currency. If the currency is being dissolved, the claim is being dissolved with it. In stable times, money is a bridge between today and tomorrow. Hyperinflation burns the bridge from the far side first. For a while, from where you stand, it still looks intact in your bank ledger. But step onto the bridge, and you discover that the planks ahead are already gone. Inflation rearranges society with brutal and cold precision. It punishes the slow, the fixed, and the obedient. It rewards the fast, the connected, the indebted, and the mobile during the crisis. In Germany, large industrial combines survived well. Nervous citizens moved early into diamonds, works of art, and safe real estate to preserve wealth. Exporters earning harder currency had an edge. Meanwhile, widows, pensioners, and teachers living on fixed claims were stripped bare of everything they owned. Germany offered a second warning later. During the 1948 reform, the exchange was set at 1 Deutsche Mark to 10 Reichsmark, expropriating savers again. Expropriated means wealth taken away by the structure of the reform. The same pattern appeared again in later financial crises like Argentina and Lebanon. At this point, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Argentina in 2001 and Lebanon in 2019 show how savings can be trapped or destroyed differently. In Argentina, the problem came through bank restrictions and forced conversion. In Lebanon, it came through a banking collapse and capital controls. On 1st December 2001, under the Corralito, depositors were restricted to withdrawing only 250 pesos per week. Your money was yours, but unreachable. The savings account became a fenced field. Later, many dollar deposits were forcibly converted into devalued pesos. The meaning of the account changed entirely. Lebanon's crisis was among the most severe globally since the mid-19th century. Real GDP fell, and inflation averaged 84.3% in 2020. The burden of adjustment was highly regressive, concentrated on smaller depositors and the bulk of the labor force. That should stop you cold. Customers were limited to just a few $100s a week. People could see balances on paper, but could not access hard currency freely.